Hey everyone, Jaime with Port St. Lucie Mortgage Brokers. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Today I have compiled a list of questions that I recommend home buyers ask their loan officer throughout the process to ensure that you are an informed consumer. Not only so you have the information, but also to protect yourself and to set the correct expectations to get you to closing as smoothly as possible. Now, some of these questions I'm going to kind of elaborate a little bit more than others. Some of them are pretty simple and kind of self-explanatory once I answer it. But I wanted to make sure I kind of hit on all of these at some point through this process. At the end of this, I am also going to talk about a question that I've kind of gotten throughout my my career over the last 25, 26 years. And I will say why it is not a good gauge for the consumer. And I'll explain that if you kind of hang out to the end here. But so let me get started. This is in no particular order. And again, I'm going to elaborate on some more than others. So let's get started. So the first one is, will this be a hard credit inquiry? This is good for you to know because you want to make sure that you know if your credit's going to get pulled and possibly negatively impacted. And this is important so that way you can protect your credit and avoid you having to pull your credit until you are personally ready to take that step forward. So always ask, is this going to impact my credit? All right. Number two, how much can I borrow up to? Most clients ask for a specific loan amount. Hey, do I qualify for a $250,000 house? Unfortunately, once you start looking for a house, that 250 might turn into 300 or 275 or just basically a higher number. So you definitely want to know what your cap is or the closest to that. So that way, at least you know what you have to work with, and you can make a decision for yourself if you want to stay below that or considerably below that. All right. What is my required down payment? Now, this type of question is going to really come down to kind of once you find that price range that you're really looking for. At the beginning, you might get a percentage amount, maybe a 3.5% if it was an FHA, or 5% or 3% first-time home buyer on a conventional loan, or maybe no money down on a VA or USDA. But again, at the beginning, it's usually a percentage. As you find a home and the price range that you're going to be settling with, it should turn into an actual figure that you can expect that you will need for closing. What is my interest rate and the annual percentage rate, also known as APR? Interest rate, so I'm going to kind of separate these two questions real quick. Interest rate is a simple question, and hopefully it's a question that everyone's asking at this point. But it's basically, what rate are you going to pay on the money that you're borrowing? APR is a little bit different. APR is basically how much is the cost of the loan on an annual basis. And it's a little bit confusing only because there are some fees at closing that are considered prepaid interest, and it's added into these figures. So usually you'll see where the interest rate is an amount and the APR is higher because it is that rate plus the extra cost. I don't, as a consumer, as a loan officer, we're required to give you what the APR is, but as a consumer for myself, I don't try to use that number to gauge because I would rather know what the rate is and what my cost is, which is, again, one of the questions I'm going to talk to. And then, okay, of course, you're still going to get that APR, but again, as a consumer, I'd rather break it down and know what my interest rate is that I'm paying for and what my cost is. All right, moving on. Are points included in my rate? So sometimes I get borrowers or buyers that are shopping around, and they give me a call and they ask me for the rate. I quote the rate, and then they're like, well, this other lender is quoting me this great rate compared to yours. And my first question is, great, that's awesome. Are you paying points for that? And there's silence. So they didn't ask. So one of the ways to get a lower rate is by paying points. It's rare, but sometimes you do have to pay points to get the loan, and that, again, that's a rare circumstance that you have to. But points are not a bad thing. It just depends on how you structure it, and it usually based on the buyer, the borrower, if they want to pay points to get a better rate. And again, a lot of things go into that, and a good loan officer like myself would walk you through the reasons why or why not to pay points. But they're not always bad, and again, they're rarely required. All right, what are my closing costs? And again, this question, like the down payment question, it's kind of an average at the beginning, and then it'll get a little bit more detailed as you go through the process, knowing what price range and home that you buy. But basically, you just want to know, what are you expected to pay? Is it an appraisal, some other costs, upfront costs like that appraisal, title fees, recording fees, doc stamps, and maybe even prepaid fees, which are like your insurance or setting up an escrow account, things like that. So you definitely want to get an idea of what those costs are. Now, what is your timeline or processing for this for the closing of this loan? This is important as a buyer, especially if you're trying to time the purchase. Meaning, let's say you're in a lease and it runs out in June. You don't want to close in February, and you definitely don't want to close in October, because where are you going to live, right, for those few months? So you definitely want to know what that processing time is. Sometimes the type of loan or the lender may make a difference in that time frame. So you definitely want to ask that question, so that way you protect yourself. All right, are you working with a real estate agent, or do you work with real estate agents? I guess the question should read. This is very important, specifically if you, as a consumer, are not working currently with a real estate agent. Like loan officers, we're not all built the same. We're not, not everyone's equally as good. Same thing with the real estate market, right? Or realtors. Some are better than others. Being in this industry, as a loan officer, we get to work with a lot of real estate agents. So I would lean on, if you don't have a real estate agent that you trust already, I would lean on a loan officer to maybe guide you into possibly working with some of their real estate partners that they've worked with in the past. All right, what are my monthly payments? Very important, again, the question that I normally get anyway, but you definitely want to know what that payment consists of. Does that payment, is it only principal and interest, right? Does it include tax and insurance? Are you quoting it with or without the association fee? Is there mortgage insurance included in that payment? So you definitely want to ask all these questions. You want to make sure that you're an informed consumer, protecting yourself. You know that the payment, what that payment is, so that way you, regardless if you qualify to have that payment or not, that you feel comfortable and that it fits your lifestyle to purchase this house and move forward. All right, what is the term of the loan? Very simple question. Usually at this point, most loans are 30-year mortgages. When the rates were a bit lower, we were doing a lot of 20, 15-year mortgages. But just know what the term is. You definitely don't want to be surprised at closing when you thought you were getting a 15-year mortgage and it happens to be 30 years or twice as long. All right, how will I be updated during this process? Now, this is just so you could have a smoother process and a good relationship with your loan officer during the process. Some buyers like to have conversations. Some of them are more proficient in text or efficient in texting or emails. Relay that information to your loan officer, because remember, your loan officer also has their preferred method of communication. My personally is speaking with the borrower whenever I get the opportunity to, because usually when I share information, there's always more questions behind it, and texting usually doesn't do a great job, or email, of explaining those follow-up answers for the buyer. So just be on the same page, and that way you ensure yourself you have a smoother process. All right, is this offer being pre-approved or pre-qualified? Now, usually for the pre-approval, it is once you've provided documentation of some sort, let's say your income or your assets, however it is that they're using, to qualify you. But you want to make sure, is this some easy pre-qualification that nothing's been verified, sometimes not even credit, or is this an actual pre-approval, meaning that you've verified that you've done your due diligence, Jamie, and I am, you're comfortable or confident that I'm going to qualify for this loan. So you definitely, again, this is going to be a life time saver for the buyer, and I highly recommend usually going through the pre-approval process. Although it's a lot more heavy lifting at the beginning, it's going to make the process easier and better for buyer's experience. All right. What credit score do I need to qualify for this specific program that you've explained? That is really important. If, let's say, conventional, or let's say a FHA or VA that you're going to apply for, the minimum credit score is 620 or 640 or whatever that case may be, and you know that you're at 580, right? Now, obviously, you have the right to apply, but do you really want to get your credit pulled knowing that you're sitting at 550 or something along those lines? And again, your loan officer's job and is required to allow you to apply, to encourage you to apply, because we want to make sure everyone has a fair shot of qualifying for that mortgage. But as a consumer, you want to make sure that you're just not getting your credit pulled willy-nilly all over the map, especially if you know where you stand and you're being educated on the minimum requirements for that type of program. All right. Moving on here, how much money will I be required to bring to closing? This is probably kind of, if I go back to the required down payment and my closing costs, things like that, this is probably the best way to ask those questions, because there might be some credits that you're going to be getting. There might be some extra fees that you don't know of at the beginning of the process. That's going to tell how much you bring in. And at the end of the day, that's usually the most important question, especially for first-time homebuyers that may not have a lot to work with. You definitely want to know what is that final number that you're expected to come to closing with. That way you can set expectations to save for that amount, or if you need a gift or something like that, that you could ensure you have that amount to get to closing. All right. Now, I wanted to give you a bonus question. Now, this question, I've been asked this question as long as I've been doing the mortgages. And I'll start by saying it's kind of always an uncomfortable question, but there's really no benefit to the buyer, and I'll explain what the question is here in a second. But there's no real benefit to the buyer because the information that's going to be given to you is not transparent. So here's the question, Jamie, how much money are you going to make on this loan, or are you going to be charging for this loan? Why? So let me start by saying this is not a question that as a loan officer or mortgage broker, more specifically, we can avoid. Mortgage brokers specifically are required to let the consumer, the buyer, know exactly how much they're going to be making on a loan. If you get to your prior to your closing, when that final closing disclosure goes out, there will be a line item for how much that mortgage broker is going to be charging you and will be making on that loan. Unfortunately, that doesn't go the same for banks. So, or other lenders. So if you were to call the Bank of Americas or the Wells Fargos or the Chases or the Loan Depots or the Guaranteed Rates or all these different types of lenders, they are not required to disclose how much that loan officer is making. So usually the answer you may get from those types of lenders is that, hey, it's already worked in. Well, guess what? It's also worked in on the mortgage broker side. We're just disclosing how much we're making, where these other lenders don't have to disclose. And to their credit, sometimes they don't know how much they're going to make off a loan because they're paid on tiers and all these other things. But rest assured, a loan officer that is sitting across from you or on the other line, on the other side of that phone call, they're getting paid. They just may not disclose it. At the end of the day, there's no benefit to a buyer to know if someone's making $5,000 compared to $10,000. Hey, maybe they work for a crummy company that doesn't pay well, or maybe they work for a company that's paying their loan officers more than they should, or a brokerage. So it's a very confusing question, but at the end of the day, there's no financial benefit when comparing one lender to the next, if that makes sense. So that's a question I get all the time, but there, again, you could ask it as a mortgage broker. Even if you don't ask it, I'm going to let you know. But just know that it's not a fair comparison when you ask a mortgage broker that is an independent broker versus someone that works directly for a lender, because by law, they just don't have to tell you. So hopefully these questions help you kind of become a better consumer. If you have any questions on any of this information, feel free to make comments below or reach out to me. My contact information will be below. But other than that, I appreciate you. If you like the information, please click the like and the subscribe button. It really helps the algorithm and helps the channel get more followers. Again, I appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.